Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Encounter Church. We're so excited to be here with you. Hope you're warm. And we're going to start off by singing some songs. We'd love it if you'd stand up and sing with us. I'm going to wait for the walls to fall. 'Cause I know a name that will bring them down. I've got a praise waking within my soul. Not ashamed to declare it now. Come on. Light of the world, trample the darkness. Nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise. Every word will be accomplished. Nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise. Prepare the way, the King of glory comes. Before his name, every fear must bow. Throw off your chains, Jesus destroyed them all. Up from the grave, he's with us now. Light of the world, trample the darkness. Nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise. Every word will be accomplished. Nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise. Come on, sing this with me. The gates of hell will never stand a chance. Your name prevails, Jesus the great I am. No word will fail, no weapon formed against your name prevails. Jesus the great I am. The gates of hell will never stand a chance. Your name prevails. Jesus the great I am. No word will fail, no weapon formed against your name prevails. Jesus the great I am. Light of the world, trample the darkness. Nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise. Every word will be accomplished. Nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise.
Good morning, everyone. How you doing today? Everyone doing okay? All right, now raise your hand if you're excited about the coming snow. Anybody? All right, great, like 7 people. Good. All right, maybe 17 people. Listen, you have to be excited about this because you're not going to be excited about it in April, right? And so if you're not excited about this little snow coming, a little winter weather, you're setting yourself up for failure for the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 months, right? All right, and so we're glad that you're here at Encounter Church. We're going to sing a few more songs together. Then our pastor's going to come and start a new series called Light of the World. We believe that Jesus is the light of the world, and that is why we celebrate this Christmas season. If you're a first-time guest, we want to give you a very special welcome. We'd love for you to download our app. It's a way for you to engage with us. As you get to know us, we want to get to know you. You can do that by downloading encounterchurch.com/app. We also have a connection connection card you may have received when you came in the door. You can fill out that connection card and later in the service place it in the offering basket, and that'll be a way that you can engage with us. So, you ready to sing a few more songs together? And after we do that, our pastor will come. Thanks for being at Encounter Church today.
oceans deep, my faith will stand, and I will call upon your name, and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace, for I am yours, and you are mine. Your grace abounds in deepest waters. Your sovereign hand will be my guide. Where feet may fail and fear surrounds me, you've never failed, and you won't start now. So I will call upon your name, and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace, for I am yours, and you are mine. You are mine. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead. Come on, church, you sing. Without borders, let me walk upon the waters wherever you call me. my eyes above the waves. My soul will rest in your embrace, for I am yours, and you are mine. You may be seated.
I'm alive! I'm alive! Yeah? Oh, yeah! Hey, Christine! You're here too! I love you!
I know.
Dad, what's happening?
Honey, the power works! It's coming, it goes on and off whenever we want! We've got clean water! Oh, that's great, look at that! Ooh, I bet I know what this does! Rain down the glorious water! Ah, shoes. Oh, what do we got here, guys? Food. I love food. What? A beef steak? You gonna have work? This is awesome. Look, listen here. Eat the what?
Jack, be careful.
I have a car. Did you guys see this?
Yeah, you have a car.
A car!
And don't forget your coffee.
You're the best.
I love that video. A church produced that 3 or 4 years ago. And to me, it really captures the essence of this holiday season, from Thanksgiving on to Christmas. And that in the midst of this holiday season, even as I landed and kind of finalized our November series last week, we looked at gratitude as being this posture of life and how transformative gratitude can become and how it can be a truly like just freeing force for our life. And that this video, I think, really just captures well what that gratitude as a posture of lifestyle looks like, of waking up every morning with this awareness of what's there around you. And that we don't necessarily have to jump into creating gratitude journals, but I think just periodically reflecting on what could be, or what would life be like if we didn't have what we had in our lives, is just a really powerful reminder. But even as I kind of left you last week with a kind of a burning question, I think that the heart of why we've started this series in December called The Light of the World is that gratitude is not the finish line. That even in the midst of that video alone, that gratitude is not the end goal. Gratitude's a starting point. It's the beginning, but it's not the end. And that oftentimes we can lose sight of that we want to foster gratitude, and then even in popular writing, gratitude is held up as if somehow it's the end goal. But I think even the holiday we just celebrated actually hints at the fact that gratitude isn't. We call it Thanksgiving because thanks isn't the only thing present in that day. As a compound word, it points to something. It's the same thing that Paul points to in the letter to his young protege named Timothy. It was the same thing I left you with last week as we reflected on, for a solid minute, who are the people in our lives that we're most grateful for. And that I left you with this simple question of, what if there was someone in this world that felt the same way about you that you just felt about them, and the gratitude that you had for those people in your life? And so if you're here today and you didn't hear last week's message, I would encourage you to kind of jump into that. It's a really kind of great primer for what does it look like to live your life with gratitude as your posture. And even as alluded, there is just a really solid minute in that message where we're meant to kind of lean into fully and experience what we just saw in this video with this guy. And today I want to kind of pick up on where I left you last week with this idea of how. Because I think for many of us, we want to become people who other people are grateful for. That we want to experience not just the starting point of gratitude, but we want to experience the finish line as well. And Paul, in that letter to his protege called Timothy, actually begins to kind of mark out for us a path forward in how we can do this. Because I think deep down inside, we want to live lives that are just bigger than ourselves. We want to live lives that aren't just different, but make a difference. And that what Paul spells out for us in really just two simple sentences, after the sentence that we looked at last week, he gives us a way how we can experience and become those type of people. If you remember, Paul writes this letter to Timothy, and Timothy's in a city called Ephesus, and Ephesus is one of the most affluent and influential cities in the ancient world. It's a place with running water, hot and cold. It has indoor heating systems. These people were far more technologically advanced than almost any civilization up until modern civilization. I mean, they were truly extraordinary in their technological and their societal breakthroughs and what they were doing. And so Timothy, as a young 30-year-old, is dropped in the middle of that. And there are wealthy individuals and there are influential individuals. And Paul tells Timothy, go lead them. And Timothy has none of the backdrop that they have. He has none of the life experiences. And Paul writes this letter, and at the end of the letter, he begins to give specific instructions for Timothy around our lifestyle and what our lifestyle could look like. And I even pointed out last week that for many of us, we oftentimes would kind of self-select out of rich or wealth. And we would read this and say there's a 1%, they have private jets and they have, multiple homes and they live lifestyles that I don't live. And yet, if you take a step back and realize wealth and richness is all relative, that if you make more than $33,000 a year, you are the top 1% in the world. That there is this reality that I think Paul would be speaking to us. And he writes these words, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant or to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us for everything for our enjoyment. And then he continues, because he doesn't just want to end, right? He's like, gratitude, this God who richly provides everything, that's the starting point. Then he continues, command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. You see, Paul is trying to cast a different vision for a lifestyle for these people. He's trying to teach Timothy how to envision what life could look like for these individuals in this ancient city called Ephesus. And his point is not that giving is the luxury of the rich. He's not trying to, he's not simply saying giving is a luxury of the rich. It's not. Giving isn't a luxury of the rich. It's the response of the grateful, which is really different. That oftentimes we think, if giving is something that the wealthy should do. But what Paul lays out in this passage right before verse 18 is actually that giving is a response to gratitude. It's present even in the word thanksgiving. Thanks, then giving. It's this compound word. And he's trying to cast a vision. And the reason he's specifically highlighting the rich in this passage is not to condemn them. He's just saying, hey, the rich are a great example of this because they have more to be thankful for. Thus, they should be even more generous because they have more opportunity for gratitude. They have more opportunity to reflect on what they have. There's an obligation that comes. He's trying to redefine what rich really is in this passage for them. That rich isn't about what you store up in this life. It's about how you spend your life. It's not about the goods that you have. It's about the good that you do. And that's completely different than the kind of the finish line and end zone that most of these people had established for themselves. That most people just want to live in a different income bracket. And Paul's trying to say, no, actually what I really want to call you to is not a life that has a different socioeconomic standard, but that makes a difference. Because isn't that true? If you were here last week or listened to the podcast, the person that you thought of that made a difference in your life, I imagine, especially if they weren't family, that the reason they made a difference in your life was because not because of their socioeconomic standing. It was because they somehow stepped into where you were standing and helped you to move to a different place. They saw something in you. They called something out in you. And so even our examples and our experience points to this. And I think that one of the barriers that we have oftentimes, and even leaning into this, even if you get past the fact that, oh, wait, I just came to church today for the first time in a long time. This dude is going to talk about money, isn't he? I knew he was going to talk about money. I told you he was going to talk about money if I came. And look, he's talking about money. No, this is not about me talking about money. This is not about what I want from you. This is what God wants for you. This is what Paul is saying through Timothy to you and I today. Like, we're all collectively thrown in. And I think that besides that specific barrier, that oftentimes there are some barriers in the way for us, from us becoming these generous people. That's meant to be a reflection and a response to our gratitude. And the first, actually, I want to give you two guiding principles that have been super helpful for me that I've gotten from my mentors through our journey towards generosity. And the first principle is this, that you should do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. Do for someone what you wish you could do for everyone. Because oftentimes we fall into the trap of saying, well, I can't help everyone, so I really shouldn't help someone, or I can't help someone. And this is something that we inadvertently get taught growing up, right? I mean, we've all had moments with adults when we were kids, or even as adults in places where someone leans and they're like, look, I wish I could do this for you, but if I did it for you, then I'd have to do it for everyone. Right? We've all been told that at certain moments when you're like, hey, just check me out. I know that you don't have to, like, there's all these really long lines. Will you just check? If I did it for you, I'd have to do it for everyone. When you were small and there was that extra, cookie, and you're like, can I have that cookie? And they're like, no, if I did it for you, I'd have to do it for all your siblings. And you and I both know on the inside that wasn't right? Because you'd want to say, look, I won't tell if you won't tell. If you do this for me, it will stay in between us. Like, this will be our secret to the grave, right? Like, we know this. And growing up, we would have these moments where, like, in your mind, when they're saying, if I did it for you, I'd have to do it for everyone. And you're like, no, you don't. You only have to do it for everyone if I tell someone. And I'm not. So we're good. And I think this barrier gets in the way from us being able to practice this generosity the way that we were intended to. And instead of not participating, not being generous and not doing good for someone because you can't do it for everyone, I think you flip it and you do for someone what you wish you could do for everyone. I mean, that story that you had in your mind, those people, the individuals, when I was thinking last week at this minute, there was one person that came to mind. And I'm so grateful that they did for me what they wish they could do everyone. I was the exception that they made. And I imagine that you were someone's exception too. You were some school teacher. You were some coach's exception. You were some supervisor's exception where they saw something in you that they thought was exceptional and they called it out of you. That some teacher along the way, some friend or neighbor did for you what they wish they could have done for everyone. And that exception led to you having that exceptional amount of gratitude last week. Even this Thanksgiving, I experienced this. My wife was in the kind of preparing one of the meals, and she's working through the recipe, and she was like, "Oh my goodness, I'm out of noodles." And this specific recipe called for more noodles, and we didn't have enough. And she's kind of in this place of desperation. She just calls Roche Brothers, which is a grocery store down the road. And someone answers. She was like, "Oh my goodness, are you open?" And the guy's like, "No, we're closed." And she's like, "Ah." And he says, "Well, what do you need?" And she's like, "I need elbow noodles." And he was like, "Barilla?" I think that's what it's called. "Elbow noodles?" "Yes, that's what I need." 16 ounces? "Yes, that's it." "All right, how fast can you get here?" She's like, 3 minutes, and she's like, "Drive there very fast." So she calls me. She's like, "You got to get to this grocery store." And I pull up in the parking lot, and I have this guy's cell phone number, and I call. And he comes walking out of the store with a bag, and he hands me the noodles, and I'm like, ready to pay, and he's like, "It's free." And I'm like, can we hug? Can we, no, oh, okay, that's okay. I respect your boundaries, right? But I'm like, I get in the car, and my daughter's with me, and I was like, that was amazing. She was like, "I want to work for him one day, Daddy." Because she was just so blown away at this guy's like niceness. And I was driving back, and this message was kind of already percolating in the back of my head, and I was like, man, that is such a great example of what it looks like to do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. And if we walked into our lives with the freedom that that principle brings, it would start to loosen the chains, and it starts to allow us the freedom to practice the generosity that you and I deep down inside want to actually practice. The second principle that goes alongside of do for one what you wish you could do for everyone is that you have a responsibility to pour out your cup. You're not responsible for filling up theirs. So let me tell you what that means, because this is a really helpful principle. Because this is, I think, the other barrier we get into when we try to practice generosity. So you're only responsible for pouring out your cup. You're not responsible for filling up theirs. I don't know if you've ever been on the other side of someone in need, right? Maybe you experience this just walking down the street in the city, and there's someone who's homeless, and this tension, I think, kind of naturally bubbles up. You see someone, you're like, man, they don't have a home, they don't have food, it's really cold, they barely have a coat on. And in that moment, all you see is the cup that they need to be filled with. You see all of that cup, and you look at your cup, and you're like, man, they are a bucket, and all I have is this little tablespoon. There's no way I can even make a difference. Because you see their cup and what needs to be filled. If you've ever sat along through someone going through grief, I think this is one of the reasons we don't step into people's grief. Is because you watch someone walking through grief, and you see how empty they are. And you recognize how much they need in order to be filled, and you look at what you have, and you're like, I can't. It's just a drop. And oftentimes, that same idea keeps us from stepping in and making a difference in their life. We don't serve, we don't do good, because we look at what we have, and we look at what they need, and we just exempt ourselves out. But when you recognize that you're not responsible for filling them up, but that you are responsible to emptying you out, it puts you in a posture to be able to say, not apologetically, but to say, this is all I have. But all I have, I give to you. In that moment so maybe you walk by that homeless person, and you're like, I can't fix their life. I don't have a job. I don't have a house that I can give them. But you got $5. And I recognize for some of us that's a tension, because we're like, well, they're probably going to go take it and use it for drugs. And I'm like, oh, okay. So, I mean, I don't know that, actually. Now, sometimes I actually have driven by people who were holding signs that says, I'm homeless, and if you give me money, I'm going to go drink or do drugs with it. And I'm like, I appreciate your honesty. I'm probably not going to facilitate your addiction. However, for most of them, I don't think that's the case. Again, I may be naive, but here's the freedom it brings to me. I'm not responsible to filling their cup. I'm just responsible for emptying out mine. It gives me a healthy boundary in my life. It means that you can sit down with a coworker who's going through a hard time, or you can see your neighbor who's in the midst of a struggle, and you don't have to feel the pressure of fixing their life. You just get the privilege of showing up in it and pouring out a little bit of what you have that can make a difference for them. Because I think sometimes deep down inside, we want to fix, and because we can't fix, we just walk out. And that these two principles actually can be truly freeing for us when we step out. We can give our time, we can give our treasure, we can share our talents without feeling bad, that we didn't fix the problem. That we'll only have 1 hour. That's okay. You have 1 hour. You're not responsible for filling up all their hours. But you have 1 hour, so give it to them. Use it. And the beauty is that when you start to do this, then you start to experience a life that's not just different, but actually makes a difference. And then Paul in verse 18 actually shows us not just how we can do it, like the two principles already illustrate, but what we can do. He kind of unpacks two different things. He lays out a life of good through good deeds, and then a life of good through donations. That's kind of the two D's in there. He says it 4 times in different ways, but he's doing that to make a point. This is not in a day and age where italics and bold and underline and capital letters have creeped in for effect. And so one of the way that ancient letter writers would make a point or to illustrate a point is they would repeat a phrase or they would repeat a word multiple times over and over and over. Some of us, your kids, tell you do the same thing when you're talking to them because you repeat yourself over and over and over. And why do you do that? One, because you think they're not listening, which is probably true, but true because you recognize what the ancient people recognized, that sometimes you want to really make a point, you say it over and over. And so Paul says this 4 different times, 4 different ways to make the point, to cast a vision, to paint a picture of what the life that is generous looks like. That it's good in both time and in the giving of treasure. And that by doing both of those things, we start to reflect the good in the picture of a life that's making a difference, not just a life that's different. The acts of kindness that start to be freed up because now you're paying attention to other people's tensions in life. You see your neighbor who's going through grief and how their leaves are piling up, and you can't fix their grief. You can't repair the fact that they lost their spouse, but you've got a rake, or you've got a snowblower, or you've got an oven that can prepare one meal. And you step into that, and you engage with them where they are because you don't feel the pressure to fix it. And you do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. And that this good deed done or this good donation done ends up making a difference in their life. And that ultimately, that over a lifespan of doing that, things start to transform around you. I mean, we need a world where more people are waking up in the morning looking for the good that they can do, not just griping and complaining about all the bad that's already there. That bad is the default. It is what we drift to if someone or someones don't step up and step in to make a difference. This was actually part of the genius of God and how he, not just in the writing of this letter, but in even producing the church. You see, I have a unique kind of perspective in that many of you walk in on Sunday mornings and you get to enjoy the coffee and you drop your kids off and or you drop your kids off on Sunday nights for student ministry. And what I know that you probably don't always recognize is the fact that every single person from the stage and backstage and all around, they're not being paid to be here. They're volunteering their time. The genius of God was that if people were not generous, the church would not exist. Period. If next week you decided to no longer be generous, or the people that are currently serving decided to no longer be generous, we wouldn't exist anymore. We would simply shut our doors and we'd all go about our lives. This thing is built on. This movement is predicated on people's generosity. It's an amazing thing. You walk in on Sunday mornings and you get far more than just a free thing of noodles. You experience hope. And the reason you experience hope and the reason you experience that wisdom of God through the Bible and through your kids walking away with people who are loving and investing in them because they believe that on Sunday mornings that they get an opportunity to kind of pour a little bit of water on a kid's heart so that they can learn and grow and how much God loves them. Like all of that happens because of people's generosity. It's amazing to me that all that's done out of the sacrifice of others. And that God painted a picture of what a church could be based off of that. That Sunday mornings, we take it serious. That one of the reasons that your kids love it, we just have a passion. I didn't grow up in church and have the experiences my daughter is having, but one of the things that we envision is a church where kids walk in on Sunday morning and they're the ones dragging you here, not the other way around. Because they walk into an environment and they step into a room filled with adults and even teenagers, right? Who are so excited about being here on Sunday morning because they realize that they get to step into a holy moment, a special moment where they get to show kids that they're loved and that they have value and worth. And I just imagine, what if we as a church create environments where kids step in and on Sunday mornings, they have so much love and they have so much value and they have so much worth. Imagine what will happen in the generations to come if that's the type of kids that we're growing here. Some of you grew up in homes where you had that, but some of us didn't. And imagine if that's the type of environment and that's the soil. And that the reason we create that soil, the reason that soil's been created is because people like you have said yes to serving, to yes to pouring out their cup and leaning into it. And we have an amazing team of leaders who do the work, who make that possible. Because I recognize for some of us, you have a passion for kids and you want to work with students, or you would love to be a part of what happens backstage or in the greeting or in the parking lot, but you're like, I don't have a Bible degree. I don't even know what the Bible is, or I would never be able to prepare a lesson, or I don't even know how you would buy materials or to do that on Sunday morning, because my kids love it, but I'm sure I could never do that for someone else's kid. And for you to know, our volunteers, our leadership team literally does all the work in the week ahead. So people step into Sunday morning, they're handed a script, they're given all the resources, and they pour out their cup for 1 hour on Sunday morning. And in the process, they pour into the hearts and lives of little tiny kids and families. Or they're the smile that lifts someone up a little bit as they walk into the door after walking through a divorce or grief, or starting to wrestle with some of the hardest questions that life has to offer. That's one of the beauties of God's genius, and that he creates a people that exist because people serve and give. On Sunday mornings, this is how this church happens. Maybe you've never dug into church finances, which is, should be very boring. But the reason church finances exist is because people give. There are families in this church who over 10% of what they make, they just generously give to it. That sounds really weird, but that happens. Why? Because they feel guilty? No. Because they'll tell you. Because our family gives over 10% of what we make. Every single person who works at this church gives over 10% of what they make. Why? Because we work at this church? No. I was given over 10% before I ever worked at a church. It's because the genius of what God created wasn't that just that a people would be born, but what happens when you start to practice this generosity, it starts to transform you from the inside out. Most of us, we experience our lives being controlled through other things. Our cash and our calendar are often the things driving us. Rarely ever do we live in control of them. They're often controlling us. And one of the geniuses of what God set up through generosity is when you start to do good, when you start to give good, what happens is it starts to transform you too. It's almost like we were made for it. That what study after study after study has demonstrated is people who are generous, they have lower risk of dementia, they live longer, they are healthier, they have longer life expectancies, both in quantity and quality of life. And this isn't even about just, in the latter years. This is even evident in research done with teenagers, and that teenagers who live generously, who give their time, who give their resources, they actually have lower risk of anxiety and depression. They have lower risk of delinquent behaviors. And I don't know about you, but I'm all for teenagers having a lower risk of delinquent behaviors, especially when I have teenagers, right? But it's almost like we were made for it. That when we practice generosity, it does something to us. And look, I'm not here saying you've got to be generous to the church, because I know that some of you are probably like, well, I told you this was the moment. He's been leading up, and this is the moment he's doing the ask. No, I'm just saying you need to be generous somewhere. Generosity needs to be a part of your life because it is an essential to life. You were made for it. You were created to be generous. That thanks should end with giving, and it should be present. And that my personal bias is the church is one of the best places to practice generosity, both in serving and in giving. Mainly because I think we have a unique perspective in the church that Paul actually continues in verse 18, right? He says this, in this way, they will lay up treasures for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. You see, in Ephesus, they had these homes along the hills, these beautiful homes along the hillside there. And they had amazing foundations, and those foundations were the bedrock in which they would build these homes that had indoor heating and hot and cold running water and beautiful ornate living spaces and bed spaces. And Paul is building off of the picturesque setting that Ephesus has, and he's painting a different foundation. He's painting a picture of a different type of life. He's actually casting vision for something that he recognized that the rich in that community would have understood. You see, people who are successful understand this concept called ROI, or return on investment. They understand that. And this is actually what Paul is teasing out here. He's saying, look, there's a better return on investment with this. That you should invest your money in the one thing that lasts forever, which is people. Not just places and spaces and things and stuff. And he subtly says that when he says the coming age. When Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, one of the things that came out of that was his wallet that evening was given to his family. And for about 100 years, no one knew what was in his wallet. The family never opened it. And then eventually, after a series of generations, his family returned his wallet and some of his artifacts. They gave it back to the U.S. government. And so the U.S. government, when they opened up his wallet, it was actually interesting. What they found was one of these. Now, this is an actual $5 bill from the Confederacy. So this is a Confederacy $5 bill. And it was tucked inside of his wallet. And he'd picked it up, most likely, just a couple weeks before, when the end of the Civil War was beginning to materialize. And after there had been a series of surrenders in different battles, Abraham Lincoln had begun to travel into the deeper part of Virginia, into Richmond. And it's presupposed, because he never wrote about it because he died shortly after, that he picked up one of these walking through a Virginia battle site. And it's really surreal when you hold it and when you look at it, when you read it, because you understand that, like, these people for years had believed that this had value and worth. This had been the driving currency for their life. In fact, the reason it's in a plastic sleeve is because the Confederacy, at the time when they were printing, they were substantially poorer than the Northern in the Union. And so the paper they used was really fragile. And so I can't even hold the paper because I would probably end up ripping it. And so even the paper that this currency was printed on was subpar. And yet, the irony for me is the fact that Abraham Lincoln, holding the currency in his wallet, kind of illustrated what Paul is saying here. These people for a few years experienced, in the course of about 5 years, in fact, they experienced what Paul wrote here. For a few years, this had worth, and then it became worthless. And to further drive home the fact was Abraham Lincoln experienced all of that a couple weeks later when he passed away too. When John D. Rockefeller, who's one of the richest persons to have ever lived, after he passed away, his accountant said, how much did he leave behind? And his accountant supposedly answered, all of it. because that's what we all do. We leave all of this behind. And that the Confederacy experienced in a few years what we will experience over all of our years. And that ultimately anything invested in something that's worthless, anything invested in this life is temporary. And Paul's painting a picture of an investment in an ROI strategy, an ROI strategy that's about not just this life, but the coming life too. That the way we live and spend our lives, according to Paul, speaking to a group of Christians, is meant to point to the deeper reality of life. It's meant to point us to what truly lasts forever. And that's people and the investment we make in people. That's the one that doesn't go away, because they, like you and I, are meant to live forever too. And that our lives, this wasn't just a really interesting thought. I'm kind of a church history fan, and one of the things is that once upon a time, this was the church. You go back and you look through church history, are there some dark moments where people who were very selfish got in the church leadership and used the church as a mechanism for their own selfish ambitions? Yes, that did happen. Were there some misguided individuals who've used the church throughout human history to do their evil deeds? Yes, unfortunately, it's true. I would argue that the challenge is not so much that the church is broken, it's that the people are broken, because people can do that with look, I've seen PTOs, I've seen homeowners associations, I've seen local government structures that get jacked up. I've seen teams and organizations experience that. Like that, it's not a church problem, it's a human problem, because that's the common denominator in all of these things. It's our brokenness. But once upon a time, the church was a radical, revolutionary force for love and good deeds. Once upon a time, the church was a force that was known for the fact that love does. Because they had been birthed out of the greatest act of love in human history. And that as a church, we are radically committed to being that type of church. That we will be known for what we do, not what we take from. That we will be a church that's known for how we love. And that's not just on Sunday mornings where your kids walk in or where you walk in, but also in and around our community. This year, beginning this month, every single year, we take a Love Does offering. And the reason why is because as a church, we're deeply committed to being a church known for what we do for the community, not what we take from it. And as a church, you could argue, well, don't you need the money? Don't you need the finances? Right? Because there are things like Light and Goldfish and T-shirts and all kinds of random things that are part of like just every. Yes, we do. But we believe that churches should be known for what they do for the community, not what they take from it. So we are kind of crazy. The last month of the year, we just say, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take an offering the entire month into the year, and it's all going to be about not these four walls, but what happens outside of these four walls. We're going to use the money for community engagement, for the community events we do, for the compassion ministries that we do, for the benevolence that we're able to do for individuals, for the way that we're able to step in and make a difference for people walking through crisis, and the ways that we give nationally and globally to different disaster reliefs and humanitarian aid, and the way that we support organizations like us around the world. Like, we're sort of crazy like that. And then the last month of the year, this is what we do. Because we believe the church should be known for what they do for the community, not what they take from it. And that part of the beauty and the brilliance is that we live in a world that really needs to see love in action. And that for far too long, especially even in this culture, we've confused complaining with making a difference. There's a lot of people who have complaints and a lot of people who have reasons for why this world is bad, but we actually believe we should just step in and make a difference. We'll let people, talk on television and write scathing editorials all they want. We actually want to pick up a shovel and do something. In fact, that's why even as we kick off this Love Does offering, I just want to tell you one of the things that Your Love Does because we've done this every year, what has already been set into motion before this Love Does offering even happens. See, we were inspired by you earlier in the year. Some individuals stepped in and said, hey, we want to help kind of relieve some of the debt that we have from the construction of this space, and we owed $311,000. And they were going to do a 2-for-1 matching. And, they're like, bring in everything 70, up to 75, we're going to match you. And we're like, that's insane. In the middle of summer, that's just not going to happen. And because of your generosity, you stepped in. We went from $311,000 to $47,000. Isn't that incredible? Like that's you. You did that. You should clap harder for you because you did that, right? Your generosity, you paved the way for that. And we were inspired by that. We're like, man, that's amazing. I wonder how we could leverage the fact that we experience moving out of the weight of debt. How could we kind of parlay that into Love Does and kind of dream a little bit? And we've been inspired by some of our friends and organizations specifically who was starting to do this in some ways that we thought was really creative. And we have a passion. We want to make a difference in our community. So we have begun conversations with this organization who buys medical debt. And this is an organization who, they were former debt collectors who just grew sick and tired of what debt collection did to people. The constant phone calls, the letters in the mail threatening lawsuits, and just the nasty life. And if any of you have ever been on the other side of that, it's harassing. And so this organization said, we want to do good. And so they, because of their experience in debt collection, they began kind of setting up an organization that would specifically, in partnership with other organizations, buy medical debt from people who are just living right above the poverty line or below it. People who were dealing with medical debt that was crushing them. That was the reason they were being dragged into court or getting harassing phone calls throughout the week. And so that organization has been a part of a movement. And medical debt's not a debt that you go out and procure. It's a debt that really happens to you. Some sickness steps in, something you didn't plan for hits you in your face, and all of a sudden you're experiencing some of the most expensive hotel stays in the world with upwards of $10,000 a night for some people in the midst of what they're going through. And so because of your generosity, because of Love Does, and because of the way that we've been able to partner with this organization, and because of the ridiculousness of how debt collection even works in the beginning, and that pennies can buy you dollars in people's debt, this holiday season, people are going to get a letter in this area. Individuals who are living right at the poverty line or below it are going to get a letter saying, because of Encounter Church, we wanted to let you know that your debt has been forgiven upwards, right? So here's crazy. That $500,000 of medical debt in our community, in this region, will be forgiven this Christmas season because of you and your generosity. And it's like, so why? It's because we believe that a church should be known for what they do for the community, not what they take from it. And that there are people being crushed right now with a debt that they did not sign up for. They didn't ask for. And that debt's going to continue to haunt them. And this Christmas season, you as a church are going to give them that gift. And we just think that's an extraordinary thing. But that's a picture of what love does. And we don't do it because we expect anything about it, because that's the thing. When you do good, you don't do it for any reason outside of just simply doing good. And that we thought it was fitting because it's actually a picture, I think, of what Christianity is at its core. That you and I owed a debt that we couldn't free ourselves from. That we, in our brokenness, could never pay off the debt to make us perfect. And yet God stepped in, and through Jesus, he purchased our debt, and he erased it too. And that's the beautiful good news of the Christian message, is that you and I don't have to live bound and enslaved and in debt to God anymore. That we can be free. And then it's just a simple step of faith and trust in what Jesus has done that frees us from that. It's amazing. And we just love the way to step into someone's life and actually let them physically experience what spiritually God desires to do for all of us. And that if you want to be a part of this Love Does offering, we're kicking it off on Giving Tuesday because Facebook is going to be matching, beginning at 8 a.m., they're going to be matching funds given to 501c3s like us. And so our Love Does offering kicks off at 8 a.m. on our Facebook page, because up to $100,000, first come, first serve, they will match, no questions asked, through each organization. And we've done the back end work to work through all the verification, to verify all the things that they have. And so we're really excited. And we were like, you know what, let's kick off Giving Tuesday. And so if you're interested in getting a text reminder about that, I've created a number for you that you can text. It's 617-315-0315. Some of you, many of you actually last week texted this number. And if you just text the word love, that's kind of the way that I'll know. And because that comes to my phone. And so we'll create a kind of a dedicated little automated message just to get pushed out of you, put out right before 8 a.m. It says, hey, go to our Facebook page, 8 a.m. 00.00 and give. And for those who are unable to give, 8 a.m. This Tuesday, the entire month, our giving will be focused around Love Does. And so you'll be able to give through the app or here on Sunday mornings. But just know that this is actually one of those incredible things that we believe that last year was amazing Love Does offering. And we're just dreaming next year, like, wow, what could we do if we were able to be more generous than we've ever been? And then to have a matching offer step into that just makes it extraordinary. And in fact, my watch right now is vibrating because you're texting. And I was like, why is my arm shaking? It's because you are just awesome like that. And we're so grateful. Because here's our heart. We believe the best is still yet to come at this church. This church was never built on me. This was never built on any of us. This is built on who he is and his act of love and his act of generosity and his forgiveness for us. And that we imagine a people that get unleashed around this region, who make a difference, who do good, who are people who do live in a posture of gratitude, but who understand that gratitude is not a starting line. It's not just a finish line, it's a starting line to the good that we can do. And so I can't wait over the next year to see what God's going to do through you. And throughout the month of December, we're going to share some of the good that you've already been doing out of this last Love Does offering. And so through the month of December, in our series, The Light of the World, we're just going to celebrate your goodness and your generosity. And so thank you. Thank you in advance for those who give. Thank you in advance for those who've been giving, for those who serve, or for those who are even interested in serving. And let's begin to step into our world, even in this month of December, and start to become light in this world that shines bright, that does good, and that shows people that God's for them. Let's pray. God, thank you. Thank you for the goodness and the love that you have for us. Thank you for the generosity that has already been demonstrated in this room. Thank you that we get, as a church, in small ways and in big ways, show regularly to individuals in our community that God is for them and that God loves them. But thank you even more so, Jesus, for the last verse in that passage that tells us that you are a firm foundation, that you are that foundation that we can build our lives on. That you're the one that is the only one that's worth building a life, this life and in the next. So thank you for your love. Thank you for your example, and help us to be a reflection of that kind of life and of that type of love. And it's in your name, Jesus, that I pray. Amen. I want to thank you for being here today. We're going to close out today with a song that is built out of that last passage. It's a song called Build My Life. And it's the simple idea that God's foundation that Paul alludes to in that last passage is firm. It is strong. It can carry us through dark times, and it can walk us through valleys, and it can walk us through mountaintop victories. And it's a foundation that allows us to live in every season with a sense of hope and a sense of joy and a sense of confidence that God is with us and for us, and that our lives can not just be different, but can make a difference in the lives of those around us. And that this declaration through this song of Build My Life is just meant to be a prayer for us today as we start to envision what our lives could look like this week. For some of you, during this song, it may be that you say, you know what, I'm going to start serving. I'm going to, volunteer my time outside of the church and an organization I've been thinking about. Or maybe for some of you, it's to say, you know what, I'm going to step in. I'm going to start serving. I'm going to, just one Sunday a month, I'm going to start kind of, and I would encourage you, if that's you, to during this song, whether it's with the connection card or whether the app through the connection card, to actually take that step and to let us know you're interested, because we'd love to have that conversation. For some of you, it may be, hey, I want to learn more about this foundation, or I want to kind of make this foundation known. And so in a couple weeks, just one of the things we're doing in December is we're going to celebrate through baptism, which is that physical expression of having that hope and that foundation that comes with Jesus, of knowing that he has transformed us from the inside out. And baptism's kind of that physical picture. And so for some of you today, your next step is to say, you know what, I want to show this family that I'm part of the family. And for you just during this response time to kind of click on the app and say, I want to sign up, or I want to learn more about baptism. That whatever that response is for you, we want to give you time during the singing of the song to take that next step, to put that plank up, and so that through our lives, every single choice we make, every single move that we make would be a life that's built on him and the foundation that he offers. So let's sing as our team moves around and as we respond.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. All right, sing this with me. Here we go. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me your love to those around me. And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken, and I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. And holy, there is no one like you, there is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder, show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken.
Thanks so much for being at Encounter Church today. As Chris shared, there are so many opportunities and ways that we can give just a little bit of the cup that we have to others. Because remember, it's awesome if you can do for one what you wish you could do for all. And just a little bit can go a long ways, whether it's with your time, with your financial situation, or whatever it is. It might even be a text to a friend or someone that you work with. So keep that in mind. And if you're looking for more ways to get involved, to give or to serve, we'd love to speak with you at Starting Point about that to give you more ideas. We hope to see you again next week as we continue this series during the month of December. Until then, we hope you have a wonderful Sunday and a great week. Take care.